Hi there. This presentation is on Mineral Track, a solution that will reshape supply chains and incentivize responsible sourcing. I'd like to introduce you to the Mineral Track team. Our team consists of developers with experience in prototyping and blockchain technology, supply chain experts, bankers, and designers. As you can see, our team is very diverse and excel in their fields of expertise. The team is set up to be cross-functional and modular to most efficiently address many of the challenges in global mineral supply chains we've encountered during this project. In different ways, ranging from on-the-ground experience to keeping up to date with news in the supply chain realm, each of us have individually encountered and heard of the dismal conditions of many artisanal scale mines, or ASMs, mines that partake in child labor, conflict support, unsafe mining practices, and contribute to water and soil pollution, which lead to serious health problems for surrounding communities. Seeing this major problem has brought us together to find a tangible solution to solve such a complex and seemingly out of reach issue. Our idea is to develop a system to increase responsible sourcing. Our first step is to map supply chains. From there, a distributed self-sustaining supply chain economy is created, in which all individuals are incentivized to contribute to the livelihood and conditions of others in the supply chain as a whole. In case you're not in the supply chain industry, let's take some time to familiarize you with supply chains, specifically mineral supply chains. Minerals don't travel directly from the mines to the technology companies that use them. The journey of a material throughout a single supply chain travels by boat, train, and truck, changes numerous hands, takes on different shapes and forms, and crosses many borders. All these factors make tracing the origin, or provenance, extremely complex. A mineral supply chain can be roughly split into two parts, the upstream and the downstream. The point at which it changes from one to the other is at the smelters. The upstream of the supply chain includes several parties such as miners, mining cooperatives, processors, and traders. In the upstream, many artisanal miners and mining cooperatives sell the extracted ore to trading houses and other intermediary traders up to the smelters. The supply chain bottlenecks at the smelters. After the smelters, the concentrated ore goes towards the downstream actors to be further refined for use. The downstream includes parties such as export companies, refiners, component manufacturers, and, of course, the final end users. For this project, we've decided to use the cobalt supply chain for a proof of concept. The large-scale social issue we seek to tackle stems from the mining sector of the mineral supply chain. From pollution and extremely dangerous working conditions to child labor, a number of mining-related practices desperately require improvement. We are particularly concerned with practices of artisanal scale mines. And at the same time, companies need a way to deal with varying international standards along with compliance and traceability that are challenging to collect and prove. Here you can see some examples of artisanal scale mines. With the help of our experts and mentors, we've identified a few related problems linked to the social issue of human rights infringements in ASMs. The first issue is that due diligence requirements, the need for an end user such as Apple, Tesla, and Fairphone to show exactly where they source from, are often incomplete and only go up until the bottleneck of the supply chain, the smelters. They often don't continue further to the upstream, leaving a large part of the supply chain, including ASMs, unaccounted for, and their operation standards unchecked. There are local due diligence initiatives to help with this problem, but that brings us to our second related issue. Oftentimes, the cost of local due diligence initiatives are carried by the upstream actors, including the mining communities themselves, meaning they are penalized for participating in compliant supply chains where their operations would be subject to higher standards. Our third problem is the low transparency and little accountability within the supply chain. As it stands, mineral supply chains are extremely long, complex, and difficult to track. There is no efficient global standardized method for tracking cobalt. Transparency is very low, and there is little accountability for human rights infringements. This brings us back to Mineral Track. By addressing the vulnerabilities of transparency and accountability within the industry, we hope to begin to solve the higher-level issues of child labor, poor working conditions, and conflict support over time. Responsible value chains can only exist when all actors are rewarded for their participation. Mining communities receive a better price for their products so that they can send their children to school, while companies like Apple can fulfill the requirements of concerned consumers and regulators and prove that they are responsible corporate citizens. We will build a system with end-to-end supply chain traceability, where downstream actors, especially end users, will comply with their standards, expand sourcing from that particular supply chain, and can even support the mine financially, generating more business for everyone involved. We've selected one material, cobalt, as a market proof of concept for a mineral supply chain, and found that by connecting all the actors of one unique linear and simplified chain from end to end, we can begin to deploy a better protocol for mapping supply chains. As described in the problem statement, the cobalt supply chain is an appropriate representation of problems experienced in the industry as a whole. In the case of cobalt, an essential component of lithium-ion batteries, 60% of global supplies are sourced in the copper belt of Democratic Republic of Congo. There, informal, artisanal, and small-scale mining represent about 10 to 20% of the national production. Inherent sourcing risk exists, given the context of political instability and extreme poverty of the local population. Most cobalt production growth within the next 10 years is also expected to come from this region. Furthermore, as similar types of actors are found in other supply chains, the model developed will provide significant insight to enable replication across other supply chains. For example, potential main candidates would be the conflict minerals, tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, where a more sophisticated blockchain-supported model for the verification of responsible sourcing practices could replace existing schemes. In the long run, the model could be adapted to other supply chains in which there are adverse human rights or environmental impacts not restricted to minerals. Our first step is to identify the actors in one end-to-end or fully connected supply chain. If enough actors provide supply chain data, we can find fully connected supply chains with end-to-end traceability. Disconnected actors or partly mapped supply chains aren't very useful yet. So the second step is to measure the number of fully mapped supply chains and the correlation between the actors in the supply chain respective to their position. This helps us to better determine where the key players in the supply chain are and how to incentivize them. We've defined 3 personas of typical users in the supply chain that provides a comprehensive picture in the scope of this exercise: mine, supply chain actor, and end user. We will now show a demo of our first steps toward a prototype that we've developed. We open up the website and create new users in the supply chain one by one. First off, we start with creating a trader intermediary. The trader intermediary adds a source, a mining cooperative located in Katanga. Then the trader adds a client, an intermediary actor in the form of a smelter. The trader is finished. Now we'll create the account for the smelter. The smelter will add the trader in the previous part as its source. After that, the smelter will add a client, a manufacturing company located in Shenzhen. The smelter is also finished. Now we'll create the account for the manufacturer. The manufacturer will add the smelter in the previous part as its source. After that, the manufacturer will add a client, Fairphone, located in Amsterdam. Now the manufacturer is finished. Finally, we'll create an account for the end user, Fairphone. The tool has now found one end-to-end supply chain, and all actors in the supply chain are notified. Here, only in the end user overview, we can see all actors involved in one fully connected branch of its supply chain. For a full prototype, a complete verification mechanism is still necessary for the end user to gain access to the full supply chain information, but we'll assume that that has already been done. The complete verification mechanism will be a set of emails and smart contracts handing over the ownership of the proof of chain to the end user. The short-term impact will show the world that it's possible to map supply chains in a more efficient manner, beneficial to all parties involved, and without exposing sensitive company information to a general audience. End users, like Apple and Tesla, have a demand for information about responsible mining practices, so that they can inform consumers and regulators about the provenance of their metals. Currently, this valuable information doesn't have a way of reaching the end users that need it. but Mineral Track will be able to connect ASMs and intermediaries with end users to share information about due diligence and make sure that everyone in the chain benefits. For the Mineral Track tool, blockchain would be used as a mechanism to prove ownership over mapped parts of the supply chain by end users in a distributed manner. The ownership of these mapped parts serves as a store of value. There are several indicators of whether a blockchain is truly necessary. The first indicator is if you need to store some compressed form of state. We'll store a fingerprint of relevant data to be able to show ownership over a certain set of documents without actually revealing the data in a public manner. Next, there are multiple writers. In our system, we'd want to be sure that everyone is able to join in. There should be no gatekeeper. There shouldn't be an always online trusted third party because data about supply chains is very valuable and in some cases the backbone of entire companies. Therefore, supply chain actors are understandably reluctant to be completely transparent with third parties. Given the power associated with such sensitive material, no single organization should have all this data. This point also holds for the identity of the supply chain actors. They should have pseudonyms with the ability to show their identity to limited actors in the supply chain. Down the road, there are two larger applications for a blockchain database in relation to this project. The first application is being able to easily identify malpractice in the supply chain. If any wrongdoing is suspected or identified, the distributed database serves as a mechanism to decentrally notify other end users that there's a bad actor in the supply chain. From there, this actor can be called out with evidence against them, and in time, a decentralized autonomous organization could be created that ostracizes bad actors in the chain and governs itself. The second application is the ability to build smart contracts on top of the conventional trade agreements currently in supply chains to increase efficiency and transparency for the parties involved. This brings us to our long-term impact. Here are some examples as it relates to different actors along the supply chain. Additionally, by generating transparency and creating more complex financial products for the supply chain, the conditions in each step of the supply chain are improved, starting with the source. An example of a financial product that could be implemented in a later stage could be a loan or a donation from an end user to one of its sources. Another example would be to create more insight into the community around a mine by paying out the workers in cryptocurrencies through a telecom network or improved version of M-Pesa, creating a local crypto economy. Our long-term vision is to improve the livelihood of the millions of unknown faces behind your smartphone, electric vehicles, airplanes, computers, buildings, railroads, light bulbs, every product that contains some sort of mineral. We want to build a distributed protocol for tracking mineral supply chains, serving everyone's needs and potentially create a crypto economy that's beneficial to all parties involved in the supply chain. Our initial marketing will revolve around the set of documents that can be served as evidence for an end user for due diligence and thus serves as a store of value. An end user can now take direct action to improve conditions in their own supply chain. Here we have the market assessment for cobalt. Cobalt is used in various ways. The main market for cobalt is the production of lithium-ion batteries, which are used in consumer electronics and car batteries. The growing demand for electric vehicles and home energy storage is driving the surge in demand for cobalt. Analysts project the cobalt supply deficit to increase by 83% to over 5,000 tons between 2018 and 2020. There is also a growing market for responsible sourcing. We've noticed a high demand for an efficient supply chain mapping protocol with the ability of creating more complex financial products on top of it. Apple, Fairphone, Cisco Systems, and ABN AMRO have all shown interest in using and implementing the system as part of their due diligence. With Mineral Track, full supply chains can be identified and sourcing responsibly is incentivized, tackling transparency and accountability in mineral supply chains. This can lead to a future where due diligence standards are raised and poor working conditions, child labor, pollution, and related health issues in artisanal mining operations are eradicated. On behalf of the Mineral Track team, thanks for watching our presentation.